How many of you would be happy if everything went right? Quality of service, reliability, responsiveness, how you get along with others. If everything went right, let's say 90% of the time. Just by show of hands, 90%. How about 95? How about 97? There's less for 97. Okay. Well, you know, there are some companies that have a 99.9% success rate. For example, Federal Express, 99.9% on-time delivery. Motorola has even a better success rate than that. So I assume everybody here would be happy if everything went right 99.9, only 1/10 of 1% off. Everybody pretty much for that? Well, if you're happy with that, I want to share some statistics with you. And first of all, with that statistic in mind, first of all, it said 12 babies would be given to the wrong parents daily if you were just at 1/10 of 1% off. And it's interesting because when I first saw this, I was in a session like you, and I heard this from somebody. I said, okay, so what? When's lunch? You know, I didn't really care. My mind was on something else. And then I thought about it a little bit. And let me ask you this. How many of you have kids that don't look like you at all? And then I started worrying about this a little bit because I have a son who's tall and good looking, so I was wondering where he came from. But anyway, moving on that point. Other things with 99.9%, 18,322 pieces of mail would be mishandled per hour. 2 million documents will be lost by the IRS this year. You probably hope that will happen. Right? Yeah, you've done your studies on that, right? Okay, I know you. And 291 pacemaker operation went wrong, and it goes on and on and on. And the question I want to start off today by asking you this is, would you still be satisfied? Would your associates be satisfied? Would your customers be satisfied? Because here's the key: good is not good enough. You know, expectations are getting higher, the bar is being raised, and everybody's judging you by their experiences that they have with others. The University of North Carolina, of 1,601 people in different companies, and they asked this question. They say, is there incivility in the workplace? Is there rudeness? Is there bullying? Is there backstab? Is there friction? Is there poor customer relations? And when they asked those 1,601 people, 89% of them said yes. But when they asked those same people, they said, are you ever rude? Do you ever gossip? Do you ever treat people badly? Do you ever have bad customer relations? Guess what 99% of the same people said? No, I don't do that. So the question is, who's doing these types of things? And that's why you've really got to take a good look at yourself. And just to give you an example of how we don't see ourselves, does anybody, how many of you ever go in an elevator and don't look at anybody in the elevator? Anybody know what I'm talking about? Anybody in your life? Am I the only one, or just a few of you? Okay, you know how you just look at the floor, you look at the ceiling, you just don't want to make eye contact with anybody. And I remember I was in this elevator one time, and just to show you how somebody just didn't see themselves at all, I'm standing up here in front of the elevator, I'm right on the door. I didn't know anybody else was in there, and I started doing this. I started going, I started coughing really loud. I did not have my hand over my mouth, and all of a sudden, a woman in back of me screamed, and she says, didn't your mother teach you when you cough, you put your hand over your mouth? She screamed at me like that. And what's your first reaction when somebody does that? You just want to knock them out. But I wrote this book called Get Along with Anyone, so I can't do that. But I turned around, I was really calm, and I looked her in the eye, and I said, you know what, I really appreciate you telling me this, because quite frankly, that's how I got this cough. I don't want to give it to anybody else, and I want to thank you for letting me know that. And you know what she did? She immediately calmed down. And guess what she said next? She said, you know what? You are so nice. She says, when I tell people what I just told you in the nice way that I told you, they start yelling and screaming at me. And then she asked me, she said, well, what's their problem? Now, I didn't have time to take out my slides and show her, but in her mind, she thought she was talking to me in a what? In a nice way. So the key is the only person in this room you can change is who? Yourself. And if you don't believe me, has anybody here ever tried to change your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or boyfriend or your kids? Anybody ever tried that before? You know, and you wonder after your 9th divorce why it's not working anyway. So, and he said, how did you guess? How many of you ever read this book, by the way, Good to Great? Anybody ever read Good to Great? People, a couple of you read it? Well, if you didn't read it, I'm going to give you the summary right here, so you don't have to read it now. But he says, good is the enemy of great. And what I mean, good is the enemy of great, is we become complacent because everyone in this room is good. You're good, you're good, you're good. You wouldn't be hired if you were not good, right? So the problem is we become so good that we don't learn more, we turn our minds off to things, and then we miss some points all the way. And a lot of times we're so good at stuff that we forget that we think we're right all the time. And just to make my point a little bit, I'd like everybody real quickly, and I'm not going to, by the way, I'm not going to do any weird exercises. You don't have to sing Kumbaya or do any group hugs. God, he wants the group hugs? Okay, this is the guy who's doing the group hug. If you want it, you're going to get him. But we're not going to do any group hugs, but I want you to do something real quickly for me, and it's to make a point. And I'd like everybody real quickly just to close your eyes, and don't touch anybody near you, by the way. Close your eyes. And keep your eyes closed, and if you, with your right hand, point where you think north is. With your right hand, point where you think north is. Okay, everybody got that? With your right hand, point where you think north is. Now with your left hand, raise your hand if you think you're right. Just keeping your eyes closed, with your left hand, point if you think right. Okay, now keeping your hands up, everybody look around the room. And then where everybody has their hands pointed. Okay, that's north up there. Okay. Somebody has north down there. Okay, I think where north is. I don't know, and I have no clue where north is, but I bet somebody's going to take out their cell phone in a minute and tell me. And by the way, that's not the point. This is where nobody cares about the point. They just want to know where north is. So I'd like to do a quick little exercise with you, because one of the things that comes up right now is communication crushers. And at your tables, can everybody do this real quickly? Can you point your finger in the air? I want you to point to somebody in the group. I want you to point to the spokesperson. Point to somebody in your group to be the spokesperson of your group. Everybody point to somebody. Everybody got somebody? Okay, somebody's going to have to be somebody in here. Okay, so what I want you to do now that we got our spokesperson, just pick somebody. That's it. I probably should have done that. Just pick somebody. This person's going to have to take notes, and this is just a 3-minute exercise. And let me give you the so what behind this exercise. Here's why we're doing it. Because today we're talking about building rapport, relationships, and connections, making it positive, memorable, and special. So what are some of the communication crushers that get in the way of us having good relationships with others?
Is interruptions, when you have a conversation.
By the way, if I can interrupt you for a second. Let me just say something about interruptions. When you interrupt people, sensitivity, rapport, commitment are killed. People hate being interrupted. For example, does anybody know anybody who talks really slow and you're just dying to put words in their mouth? Anything like that? Don't go there. Okay, just don't go there, because people hate that. Just take a breath. These were his top 10 acts of rudeness, and just make sure you don't do these. I said, talking about someone behind his or her back. By the way, what happens when you talk to someone behind his or her back? What happens? What's lost? What?
It'll get around to them eventually.
It'll get around to them eventually. And what? Trust. There you go. There we go. What Debbie said. Debbie said trust, because let's say I go to Debbie and I say, Debbie, is Linda? I say, Debbie, Linda does this, and Linda does that, and Linda does this thing. And as soon as I leave, what's Debbie thinking? What am I going to say about her? So it's you're really watching. By the way, there is good gossip, though. What's good gossip? When you say nice things. So I say, Debbie, Linda is really great. And so when Debbie goes to Linda and says, hey, he said you're really great, that's even more important than actually me saying it. Don't say a word. I just want you to look at the other person and write down 5 positive things about that person. Don't say a word. Okay, you can don't write negative things, just positive things. What I'd like you to do is each person take a turn. And if you have 2 people, just take a turn, tell the other person what you wrote. And if you have 3, you tell the other 2 what you wrote. So everybody take a turn and just tell the other person what you wrote. Soften your image. So how do you soften your image to make yourself more approachable, likable, and trustworthy? And what did we say before? People deal with people they like and they trust. It's just a human nature thing. So the S would be what? Give me the S. Smile. Okay, and when I say smile, if you do not normally smile, don't start doing it all of a sudden. Okay? Because people will wonder what you're up to. So, why is he smiling? Am I losing my job? They can rob me for once. Don't smile unless it's really good. Okay. Also, when I say smile, smile only when appropriate. You ever see these guys on the news? I saw a guy the other day that says, hi, Des and Fallujah. And it's that nervous smile that comes out. And you know what I'm talking about? Anybody see anybody like that? And they nervously smile when it's the wrong time to smile. And by the way, what's a trick to make sure you smile? Make sure, a lot of times we talk on the phone too, right? So how do you make sure you smile when you're on the phone? Pardon? Yeah. Did you hear what Debbie said? Do you guys do that here? Okay, Debbie mentioned something that I've done with a lot of other companies I work with. We instituted this because, you can go to these workshops and say, or these sessions, these short sessions and say, smile, and everybody writes it down, nobody ever does it. But we put a mirror next to every person's desk at this company. And what happened is when they got on the phone, it had to go like this. It would go ring, 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 ring. Good morning, how are you? And they had to look at themselves in the mirror, and everybody said, oh, they're so nice, they're so pleasant. Their complaints went down 42%. I always like it when I have a number I can put with these things. T is talent. You have to have talent sometimes. You've got to talk to communicate, that's excellent. But time. Tone, somebody said tone was 38%, so that's good. This is a little trickier here, because this is territory. And what I mean by territory, I'm sorry, your name is again?
Liz.
Liz. Let's say, for example, I'm getting really close to Liz here. She's kicking me. She said, I didn't buy into this. I'm leaving now. But in American culture, this is all American culture, by the way. This does vary by culture. So when I go overseas or meet with different cultures, I have to read the whole. There's a different book I read on this. But when I'm in American culture, the ideal distance to be away from somebody is what? Did you say 30 feet? You said, Yvonne, you told me this was an advanced group, didn't you? It's 30 feet. Oh my God. 30 feet, sometimes you want to be away 30 feet from somebody, but. Pardon? Is that restraining? Restraining order. Yeah, restraining order. But. Arm's length? Okay, it's close. It's about 14 inches to 4 feet is the ideal distance. 14 inches to 4 feet is the ideal distance. But anybody know anybody like this when you're talking to them, they're right in your face, and you step backwards, they just don't care. And all you pick up is what? Bad breath. You just want to get out of there. People are more convinced by your energy, enthusiasm, and conviction than by anything else you do. You might want to remember that somewhere. People are more convinced by your energy, enthusiasm, and conviction. Most people speak in a very what? Monotone. And how many of you ever hear somebody, you tune in, you tune out, tune in, tune out, and you really got to keep that energy up. It's sort of like those politicians who are all not convicted, who have a lot of conviction, and they just, you just follow them no matter what because they're so enthusiastic, right? They're so excited on things. So just be aware of that aspect of it. But the E is, what if you don't do this, you don't have rapport with people? The E is, somebody said it, eye contact, yeah. So the E is eye contact. And by the way, when I say eye contact, I do not mean staring at anyone. There is a fine line between staring and stalking, so watch out that you don't do that. And in American culture, the ideal time to keep your eyes on anyone is what? 5 seconds? Yeah, actually you said 5 seconds. Yeah. It's about 3 to 5 seconds is ideal, but don't start doing this. Okay, gotta get off now. Don't time it. Okay? Please don't time it. I don't want to see you doing that type of thing. Also, when we talk about eye contact too, how do you tell when you're talking, let's say a customer or somebody you're working with, how do you tell if they like you or are buying into what you're saying? You don't like anything I'm saying. No, how do you tell by their eyes? Body language by their eyes, though. How do you tell by their eyes if they're buying into what you're saying? Or this is important when you're talking to somebody, you're trying to persuade somebody. Are they buying into what you're saying or not? Pardon?
They maintain eye contact. They
maintain it? No? Okay, a lot of times what you really need to look at sometimes is the pupils tend to dilate. So if we're talking and all of a sudden my pupils, then you either like what I'm saying or you're buying into it. Now there is exceptions to that because I was doing a workshop for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. I worked with a bunch of doctors lately, earlier, and one of the doctors raised his hand and he says, Arnold, I don't mean to be rude. By the way, when somebody says that, you know you're going to get a zinger. He says, I don't mean to be rude. But he says, when the eyes dilate, it also could mean they're on drugs. So you think people like you? No, they're just on drugs. And by the way, when you're on the phone and you're nodding, we don't have our body language on the phone, right? So let me hear how you nod on the phone. Let me hear everybody. Let's say you're on the phone. Let me hear everybody's nod on the phone. Everybody. Okay, I don't know if I'm buying into this. You got to watch how that comes across, because that sends a message to people. And just to give you an example of this, my wife, she works actually, she's an attorney, but she works over in the SEC, and she actually, every time I talk to her, she goes like this. I'll say, how things going? And she'll tell me for 2 seconds. She'll say, how's things with you? And as soon as I start talking, guess what she does? She goes, it's literally means, look, I got better things to do than talk with you. I don't have time to do this. And I wanted to test her one day to see if she was really listening to me. I called her up, and I was in California. I was coming home on an all-night flight, and she says, how things going? And as soon as I started talking, she went, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, ha ha ha, ha ha. And a minute of ahas, you know what I said to her? I said, you know what, Nancy? I am leaving with another woman. And guess what she said? She says, ha ha ha. She says, I'll see you tomorrow at 9 o'clock. She said, ha ha ha. And she said, see ya. I thought, God, she did not hear one word I said. And then I found out later that women listen a lot better than I thought. Because I came home the next day, I put my keys in the door, and she looked at me, she says, well, what are you doing at home? I thought you left with another woman. So immediately. And what I'd like to do is I want to do a little exercise to show you, to give you something on how to avoid misunderstandings with people. What was the first word on your list? Night. Night. How many of you got that by a show of hands? Okay, almost everybody got that. So when you're trying to give directions to people, you want them to get something done, what's the point behind this? The first thing you say, people are going to remember. Because what do we say the attention span's about 8 seconds? So how many of you, again, listen, somebody says, you tune out, you tune in, you tune out. So you really want to get your point across right away. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Here's the thing I want to make sure you get. Here's the point. Don't go, it's like a speech. You know, like a lot of times people do presentations, say, hi, I'm Arnold Sanow, I did this, this, and this. You're wasting valuable time with that. Just get right into it, and that's what people remember right off. Let me ask you another question. How many of you had NyQuil on your list? Okay, about 90% of you got that. Why did we get that? That's sort of in the middle of a conversation. Brand recognition, what else?
We can relate to
It's what? It's related to sleep? Okay. Anything else? Okay, here's the point I want to make. About 60% of the American public is very visual. So what you need to do is you need to create pictures in their mind. So I always recommend people tell a story or example or an exercise, something that they remember a lot longer. So when you create a picture, they remember. For example, how many of you have ever seen a PowerPoint slide with 1 million words on it? Anybody like that? And what do you tend to do? You know, you just look for your cell phone really quickly and try to do something else. You don't pay attention to it at all. Or you know how somebody speaks very intellectually, but not emotionally. So you need, a lot of people, you need to create that story or example. You know how I've been trying to model that a little today by saying, okay, my wife, an example, or this is an example. I'm trying to, you can think of that because you can picture it versus just saying the words, don't do this or do that. Okay, let me ask you another question. How many of you have had awake on your list just by a show of hands? Okay, about 90% of you got that. Why did we get that? Last thing you said. So here's what you want to do to make sure you have no misunderstandings. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them. Tell them what you told them again. People need to hear things about 3 or 4 times. Or paraphrase at the end. How many had sleep on your list? Okay, keep your hands up high if you had sleep. Okay, about half of you had sleep. I did not say the word sleep. I did not say it. I did not say it at all. But a lot of you got it. So what's the point behind that? Misunderstanding. Or you were asleep, maybe, I don't know. I gotta eat more of that candy. Come on now. What's the point behind that?
So you're making connections based on the front and center, you know, the first and the last word, and you're sort of connecting the dots yourself.
Yeah, did everybody hear what he just said? You're making the exception, you're connecting the dots. And how many times have you told somebody something, said, I told you that? No, you didn't. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. You swore you told them, but they're connecting it into another way. So we want to make sure people walk away with the message we said and not something else. So what did we say before? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them to make sure, and paraphrase afterwards. Now, a lot of times when we're talking to people, we get misunderstood because a lot of times when we do email, we don't have any of our body language, right? Has anybody ever, you know, one word in an email can make a big difference? Anybody ever had that problem before here? You know, and somebody has a whole misunderstanding because of the word you use in the email. And just to give you an example of that, I have some signs up here I want to show you. And you tell me what this means. Here's a sign, first one I'm going to give you. Coming into Washington, D.C., this sign was up for 2 years. And you tell me what that means. It said, welcome to Washington, D.C., a work-free drug place. Now, what does that mean? You work free and get drugs? I don't know. Is that part of it? What did they screw up here? It should have been a drug-free work. You know how one word, so watch out when you're writing things nowadays. You know, when we talk about these misunderstandings too, here was one for a car dealer. This one was for a car dealer and said, if I can get this thing to work here, why go anywhere and get cheated when you can come here? By the way, do not use that as a motto for your company. Do not use that. Some of you are writing that down. To help you keep your attitude in good shape, a couple things I would mention. There's a little thing you can do, and I did this for some, Washington National Dulles Airports. I had a full-year contract with them years and years ago, and we gave everybody a little black book. And in there, they'd have to write the flip side. So this is called the flip side exercise. And so when something went wrong, what's the flip side? So for example, if you hated your job, what's the flip side of that? At least I got a job, right? Let's say you put a dent in your new car. What's the flip side of that? I'm not dead. Okay, or let's say you get caught in traffic. That's pretty bad. What's the flip side of that? At least I'm not the person who's the accident right up there too sometimes, so we can complain about these things. Here's another one that might get you. Let's say your husband or your wife or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, they sort of just took off on you. That could be pretty devastating. What's the flip side of that? Peace and quiet. Or closet space. Anyway, I think we're missing the point on that one.